Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
You could be forgiven for not knowing much about Andrea Leadsom. She's not been a politician for long, never mind in government. But in 8 weeks' time, she could be the Prime Minister.
It's nice to meet you.
Now, we know she wants to leave the EU soon, but what about some of the other tricky issues a Tory Prime Minister might face? Gay marriage. Do you support gay marriage?
I would have preferred for civil partnerships to be available to heterosexual and gay couples, and for marriage to have remained as a Christian service that was for men and women who wanted to commit in the eyes of God.
What about fox hunting? Would you hold a vote on bringing it back?
I would absolutely commit to holding a vote to repeal the hunting ban. I think it's not proven to be in the interests of animal welfare whatsoever.
Her South Northamptonshire constituency is on the route of HS2.
This village is one where HS2 has just failed to engage with the community.
The proposed but controversial high-speed railway line. If you were to become Prime Minister, would the HS2 railway line still be built?
What I would want to do is an early review of, are we sure that this offers the best value for taxpayers' money? And if it does, then I would commit to going ahead with it. But if it doesn't, then I think we would need to look at other possibilities.
Despite her prominence during the referendum campaign, Andrea Leadsom would be a relatively inexperienced Prime Minister. Standing for the top job brings an added level of scrutiny, and Andrea Leadsom has already had to defend herself against claims that she embellished her CV.
Let's catch up now with Karen Lumley, MP for Redditch, who's backing Andrea Leadsom. Welcome to the programme.
Hi.
Has Andrea Leadsom already changed her CV to say she's the new Prime Minister?
Oh, I don't think that's a bit harsh. No, Andrea is going to be going out and spending a lot of time in the country talking to the people who will decide whether she's going to be the next Prime Minister, and I hope she is, and that's our members.
Was she a marketing director or a managing director at one of her companies? Was she a deputy financial institutions director at Barclays, as she said on her CV, or a financial institutions director, as she said on her website?
I think Andrea can quite answer those questions for herself. I think for me, is she the right woman to be the Prime Minister? I think she is. And
does she know who she is and what she's done?
I think she does know who she is and what she's done. I think she's a very, very formidable woman. I think
she voted for and against same-sex marriage.
I voted against same-sex marriage, but that's Andrea's choice.
I can't hear you. Are you ready for Andrea?
Traditional Tories, though, are excited by Andrea Leadsom, her rival. The Eurosceptic Energy Minister is far less experienced. Her colleagues need reassurance about her record. But one wing of the party is enthusiastic enough to march along the river in an unusual show of Conservative support.
What do we want? Leadsom for leader! When do we want it? Now!
Before the referendum, she was hardly known.
How difficult was it to decide to run? I feel, having played a part in showing this country the prospects for us outside of the EU, I just felt I needed to put myself forward to offer to lead the way through it, because I really believe in it.
But just a couple of days into the race, she's already been accused of changing her CV.
I've not changed my CV. I have had 25 years in finance. I spent the best part of 10 years in BZW and Barclays, and the best part of 10 years in Invesco Perpetual. You know, my CV is incredibly varied, and it's all absolutely true. And, you know, I think this is, ridiculous.
My first task is to show how great our potential is as a nation. Let's banish the pessimists.
Leadsom for leader! When do we want it? Now!
And after that morning rallying cry, her MPs and other supporters marched on Parliament to head off what her team was calling a possible establishment stitch-up. They feared Theresa May's campaign would lend MPs to Michael Gove to keep Andrea Leadsom off the ballot paper, for fear the outsider, a new Margaret Thatcher to some, could beat the Home Secretary with the party members.
What we have now is a candidate we are really excited about, who we think the party and the country are going to love.
Which previous candidates have you supported? Ian Duncan Smith?
I supported Ian Duncan Smith.
Some people would say this is an attempt at the Ian Duncan Smith experiment all over again.
What you've got here is somebody who supported the side that the British people supported.
Hands up anyone who voted Remain. So you're going to unite the country?
Because they voted the right way.
Absolutely.
Have you done this sort of thing before?
I've never marched on Parliament before. This is my first time, and it feels wonderful.
You feel like a Corbynista? A sort of right-wing Corbynista?
A right-wing Corbynista.
I think she's fantastic, and I've seen people tweeting this morning, they're Labour supporters, and they are saying, we're backing her. You have to remember...
that might be a cause for some concern with some Tories.
You have to remember that she is the Leave candidate.
Some people in your party are wondering about, some of the MPs are wondering about, is whether the party that Theresa May badged, stigmatised as the nasty party, whether some of those values are getting a resurgence with your campaign.
I'm not aware that that's the case at all. I mean, you have to be more specific.
I looked around the crowd of people that were at your launch, at the speech today, and an awful lot of them are people who didn't have much sympathy with David Cameron's modernisation of the Tory party.
OK. Well, I mean, I'm delighted with the support I've had from colleagues from right across the party. I mean, my ambitions as leader would be to absolutely prioritise the success of leaving the EU. But in terms of my own agenda, I have an absolute passion for social justice.
Should we have a look at what the picture looks like now? Should we have a little listen to some of the runners and riders, see what they've got to say for themselves? The front runner, it would appear, the early favourite, even before Michael Gove apparently spiked Boris Johnson's guns, was Theresa May.
I grew up the daughter of a local vicar and the granddaughter of a regimental sergeant major. Public service has been a part of who I am for as long as I can remember. And I know I'm not a showy politician. I don't tour the television studios. I don't gossip about people over lunch. I don't go drinking in Parliament's bars. I just get on with the job in front of me.
Speaking at an EU meeting yesterday, I quite like that line. That sounded persuasive, didn't it? It sounded nice, sounded warm. Andrea Leadsom?
Pay going down, competition for school places, competition for the housing market. It's an outrage. It's all a result of a careless, undemocratic European Union institutions inflicting this upon us because they don't give a stuff. And I can tell you, I've been as an energy minister and as a city minister all around Europe, yes, in limousines. And I sit there eating this 5-course meal, drinking this fabulous wine, thinking, what on earth are we doing? We are so far removed from what's going on the ground. So we on the Leave campaign, we're a bunch of independence freedom fighters.
We're a bunch of independence freedom fighters. Now, I've mentioned to you in the past that this real decision will be taken by what the newspapers decide to share with you. So just see how much of this comes out in the coming days with regards to Andrea Leadsom. She has received plenty of financial backing from the offshore hedge fund run by her brother-in-law, a chap called Peter de Poutron, as indeed has the EU sceptic think tank called Open Europe. And as you know, offshore hedge funds generally don't pay the tax they should be paying and yet are allowed to run and buy things like care homes that we saw collapse on an epic scale not too long ago in this country, as a private hospital in Bath run by a hedge fund. So, by all means, give her a fair hearing, but this notion of being freedom fighters, unshackled, unfettered by loyalties to any other institutions, is perhaps a little bit wide of the mark.
As his campaign closes down, Andrea Leadsom's moves to the country. Her critics are pulling apart her claims about a career at the very top of finance, including helping to stop a bank run after Barings collapsed.
Eddie George, who was then Governor of the Bank of England, called together a small group of bankers, including myself, and we worked over the weekend to calm the fears of banks who were exposed to Barings.
You said in Parliament you were one of a small group of bankers, the Bank of England Governor, Eddie George, back then, called together, who managed to help to stop a bank run after the Barings collapse. Mm-hmm. Is that right?
Yes. Yes, we were calling banks and around the world and saying to them, it's fine.
It sounded like you were in a room with Eddie
banks.
George, sort of sweating it through the weekend, and you helped to stop a bank run. You personally, because that's what you said.
Yes, absolutely. So very specifically, I was at the time the banker responsible for the relationship with Barings. We were called by the Bank of England and told we need to absolutely reassure other people. And so, yes, we had some very late nights.
Because that's what people are disputing.
Yes, me. I don't know why they're disputing it, me.
A former colleague at the fund manager Invesco claims Andrea Leadsom's exaggerated her hands-on experience of high finance.
What irritated me, I suppose it's irritation, yes, I'll admit to irritation, was somebody projecting themselves as being somebody in a senior investment management role in a major organization, when actually she wasn't. Because people add credibility. You know, when they think of senior investment officer, enormous responsibility for massive amounts of money, taking daily investment management decisions, and therefore speaking with some authority on those topics. Andrea Leadsom wasn't that. She was a part-time assistant to the chief investment officer, working on special projects.
Have you heard of Robert Stevens, who worked at Invesco?
Only through the press. No, I don't know him.
Because he says you didn't manage, another of the claims that your supporters have put about, he says you didn't manage any teams, large or small, didn't manage any funds.
I'm absolutely clear. When I was at Invesco Perpetual, I was senior investment officer, working very closely with the chief investment officer.
Did you manage funds?
No, I'm not a funds manager. I managed in Barclays. I managed the team that deals with Barclays' relationships with banks around the world.
You said you ran the investment team at Barclays.
I recruited fund managers.
It's not the same thing, is it?
That I'm not sure if that's my words.
Running the investment team at Barclays.
Yeah.
It's from an article that you wrote for the Financial Times.
Okay, so that is the team of fund managers. So the team of fund managers. I mean, I don't really understand why there's such a misunderstanding.
People say you haven't got a practical experience of actually moving around the billions, and people might have got that impression from what your supporters were saying and from what you've said in the past. But in fact, you weren't doing that. You were at a different sort of management level, managing the people who do that.
Exactly right, and that's very clear in my CV.
And you've only ever had a licence to trade for about 3 months of your life.
I have not been a funds manager.
There was an evangelical feeling to the support on show for Andrea Leadsom today. She, like her opponent Theresa May, is a regular churchgoer, and according to someone very close to her, feels she has been spoken to directly by God. And we could not only be looking at two women running for the leadership, but two quite devout Christians. Do you ever feel that you've been spoken to directly by God?
That question is not one that is for, open laughing at and poking fun at, and I can absolutely feel that that's what you would like to do. So I absolutely am a Christian, and I'm very proud of it, and it absolutely acts in the background in my desire to have a very honest campaign with high integrity and so on. But if you're asking me, am I going to be sort of saying, oh, well, God's told me to do this and do that, then of course that's not the case.
Amber, you said that Andrea Leadsom is a very good energy minister,
yes,
but not really up to the... But is she? I mean, there are others who've said she's not a particularly good minister.
Well, I haven't heard that of the Energy Department. I've seen some questions about it when she was at Treasury, but there's always going to be gossip about that. I mean, I think Andrea's been a very good junior minister.
Oh, I like that. The knife slipped slightly under the skin.
I wasn't supposed to.
I saw it go.
Yeah. I wasn't supposed to. I think she's been a very good junior minister. My objection is that we are in a situation where we want the leader of the party to be Prime Minister in a difficult time, and Theresa May is the only candidate. She always has been the only candidate who has the experience, and you saw today from the scale of her support from MPs how much support she has here, already over 60%.
I mean, just for a moment, considering Andrea Leadsom, I mean, she has very strong views about homosexuality, about gay marriage, about abortion, about a number of things. She's a very committed Christian. That wouldn't necessarily be a drawback. But do you think those sort of views go down rather well in the country with the members?
They're not views that I share, and some members of the Conservative Party do, but we are a broad church, and we need a leader who's going to be a Prime Minister for the whole country and is going to take forward the Conservative Party reflecting 21st century Britain. That's got to be someone with experience, and Theresa fits the bill now.
You see, it is being said, and I think it's probably true, that members of a party outside Westminster are actually much further to the right than you are.
Andrea Leadsom, one of the two candidates in the fight to become the next Conservative leader, has suggested to the Times newspaper that she would be a better Prime Minister than Theresa May because she's a mother. Supporters of Mrs May, the rival for leader and who doesn't have children, have called the remarks offensive.
One of these women will be the next Prime Minister. So what sets them apart? One thing, apparently, is motherhood, with Andrea Leadsom implying having children gives her a real stake in the country's future. In an interview with The Times, she contrasted herself with Theresa May by mentioning her huge family and kids. She was then questioned if she felt like a mum in politics. This was her response.
Well, I don't really know Theresa very well, but I'm sure she would be really, really sad that she doesn't have children. So I don't want this to be, Andrea's got children, Theresa hasn't. Do you know what I mean? Because I think that would be really horrible. But genuinely, I feel being a mum means you have a very real stake in the future of our country, a tangible stake. You know, I mean, she possibly has nieces, nephews, you know, lots of people, but I have children who are going to have children who will directly be a part of what happens next.
An immediate outcry of outrage from Theresa May's supporters in the party followed. Alan Duncan called it vile. Ruth Davidson pointed out she is childless but has a real stake in our country. Anna Soubry said Mrs Leadsom wasn't PM material and should step aside. Better suited to obscurity than high office, added Sarah Wollaston.
Her team are making an official complaint to The Times, but the journalist who did the interview is standing by her story.
I don't think it's gutter journalism, I just think it's journalism, it's accurate journalism. I asked a question, she answered it, I reported what she said. You know, she's trying to become Prime Minister of this country. Judgment and character matters as well as policy.
But being a mum was a big part of her message during the referendum campaign.
I've run financial services businesses for 25 years and I did a stint as City Minister and I'm a mum.
It's clear Andrea Leadsom wasn't trying to be cruel to Theresa May, but it has shown her inexperience and some say her lack of judgment, so crucial if you want to be Prime Minister.
I'm deeply upset by this because I spent the first 46 years of my life as a childless single man, and what do you know, the right young lady came along and I've been blessed with 2 beautiful children, and it's opened my heart in ways which I can't explain, and Theresa May feels that pain of not having children, and she said so in an interview a couple of weeks ago. Obviously she can't have children now and she's moved on in her life with her husband.
Johnny, we're just going to stay
Yes.
with politics. We're going to actually bring you some pictures, but they're not quite in yet. Continue.
And so Andrea Leadsom, off guard, makes a quote and then tries to present this quote as, I didn't say that, and this is gutter journalism, about her having children and therefore having a greater stake in the future of Great Britain than Theresa May. And that is below the belt, and it's terrible, and it tallies in with her rather sunshine view of the world yesterday, saying, oh, let's bring prosperity to the whole of the country. Let's have all winners and no losers whatsoever. And she can't have been to the Midlands, the north of England, even parts of the southeast recently, because that'll take more than one term and a few weeks in government.
What do we think? Do we think that she has been naive in her interview, or is this a deliberate attack?
I think she's exceptionally naive on many levels. Naive with the media. And I also think she's been naive in her approach, and I think she's on the ballot to the Conservative Party members basically because Boris decided that he shouldn't be for whatever Michael Gove reasons he felt at the time, and wait on. But I don't think it's a contest at all. It could have been. She could have presented herself as a Brexiteer to the Vote Leave crew, who are predominantly in the Conservative grassroots. No longer, I think, anyone with their head screwed on who is a member of the Tory party will vote for Theresa May, and it'll be a landslide.
So do you think these comments are going to have a direct impact on whether she
I would hope
or
so, because I think they're absolutely appalling.
No, people have already come out this morning and saying that, you know, they don't have children. Does that mean that they don't have a stake in Britain's future?
It's a shocking thing to say, and I'm very confused about what her position is now. She's saying she didn't say it. She's saying she was quoted out of context.
Yes.
It seems very clear. It's very direct, and as you are discussing, I think it does show a degree of naivete. She's never been anywhere near this level of scrutiny that she's going to experience now as one of the final two for
And as for policy for Theresa May saying that we're going to have short-term pain for long-term gain, of course, you know, we need another island tax haven in the North Atlantic, which I think is what Britain will become once we negotiate our way out of the European Union.
But just to clarify, there are direct quotes in the Times, so yeah, worth reading for anybody out there.
Hearing, and also some people are saying, well, she could turn out to be Andrea Leadsom, the Jeremy Corbyn of the Conservative Party.
I think that's probably a gross exaggeration, and I think it's now going to be up to the members to decide. Admittedly, Andrea's had what Matt Charitably described as a disastrous start to her campaign, but she's got a chance now to make her points to the membership.
Well, what does that disastrous start tell us, as you term it, to her campaign? What does it tell us about her potential qualities as a Prime Minister?
It doesn't tell us very much. I think she gave a bad interview, her first major interview with a very serious journalist, and she fluffed it. She messed it up. And to make it worse, she then accused that very senior journalist of engaging in gutter politics. I don't like to see those kind of reactions in a potential Prime Minister, because she's going to have to deal with a lot more tougher people than the particular journalist, Rachel Sylvester. I think Mr. Putin might be just a little bit more difficult.
And then we have the Foreign Secretary saying most of the people he's been talking to in Warsaw have never heard of her. All in all, those of you on the May side saying she just wouldn't cut it.
Well, I think she's got a lot of potential, and she probably should have waited and looked for her chances in a future leadership election. She may possibly be blowing her chances forever as a potential leader. I don't know her at all well. I think I've heard her speak maybe 3 or 4 times, and 2 of those were at the hustings, and she isn't someone that's ever really crossed my radar. She seems pleasant enough, but yeah, I'm really looking for somebody with strength and determination.
And what about this issue of her CV, her business experience in particular, her experience in the city? Some saying she wasn't in as many senior positions as she claimed to be, but even if she was, is that exactly something that's going to appeal to the country at large, that you were in the city just before they crashed the economy in 2008?
Well, I'm sure she had a very distinguished career in the city. I've no idea. I'm told we're going to get a definitive biog fairly soon. But I think people are looking for someone with enormous empathy and a kind of understanding what it's like to be struggling to bring up not just a family, but to see the prospects in schools, the prospects for people retiring. And I think Theresa fits all those bills.
But do you think that was a low blow? Do you think she meant to mention that to contrast herself with Theresa May and having that stake in the future because she's got children and Theresa May doesn't?
Well, I described it as tacky when it first came out, and then I heard the recording, and I actually thought the recording put her in a worse position than before. But what worries me not so much, because these things happen. I was surprised she didn't have her own recording of the interview. I'm surprised if she thought it was wrong, she didn't ring very quickly and try and get the headline adjusted. But there didn't seem to be anything particularly unfair. She came up against a top-notch journalist. Top-notch journalist wants to make news. She asked her an obvious question. It was a ginormous elephant trap, and she fell into the elephant trap and then continued to make it deeper.
Got in a hole and kept digging, in your estimation. What about, though, this argument within the party, that in reality your next leader has to come from the Leave side? This idea that if they could, in a parallel universe, both go away and come back with the same deal, which inevitably involves some compromise with the European Union to get access to the single market or whatever, but that Andrea Leadsom is better positioned to sell compromise to the party than Theresa May is because she was on the Remain side.
Well, a few feet from where we're sitting, she was described by a very senior ex-cabinet as a bloody difficult woman, and I think I'd rather have a bloody difficult woman negotiating for me than someone who panics over a slightly unfortunate interview and makes it worse.
And is there any, what are you hearing within the party, around the bars and the conversations you're all having. How worried are they about an Andrea Leadsom leadership? This idea we're reading in the paper today that some MPs are saying, well, we couldn't serve under her.
I would take that with an enormous pinch of salt. I just don't believe that. I know it's been a very turbulent couple of weeks, but the idea of members of the Conservative Party splitting away to form some centre group, I think, is ludicrous. I think most members of Parliament would support Theresa May. That was pretty obvious in terms of the votes, but ultimately democracy demands that our membership picks our leader.
And do you think, though, then, whoever wins it can reunite the party? Are you saying that Andrea Leadsom actually couldn't?
Well, I hope she would. It was very noticeable on the full hustings that she was the only candidate that didn't talk about bringing us all back together again. And I think, and I hope this doesn't sound wrong, but in terms of bringing the Conservative Party is the first step towards bringing the rest of the nation together. We have to remember an awful lot of people voted on the losing side of the referendum, and the government needs to speak for everybody.
One of the symbols, I mean, Theresa May said it explicitly, Brexit means Brexit, we understand that, but it's this triggering, this formal triggering of Article 50. And we're not entirely clear, especially when we hear from the former Attorney General, Dominic Grieve, suggesting that, well, perhaps it could lead to a renegotiation, the Brexit vote. And who knows, Article 50 might not ever be triggered.
Well, it needs to be triggered when all our ducks are in a row. We need to have the very clearest idea, in particular with regard to financial services, which is a big part of our economy, whether or not we're going to be able to trade in instruments involving euros. And I think until we get that, we'd be very foolish to trigger it. I'm not sure where Andrea is on this. I heard she wanted to trigger it straight away. She told us at the hustings that she didn't, and I now hear, I think, that she wants to trigger it fairly soon. So I'm not sure. My view is we trigger it with when we're ready. It's the one important card that we've got in our hands with regard to negotiations.
Well, it's a one-way street, though, isn't it? Because whether or not you finish your negotiations after 2 years, you're out. So you use the phrase "ducks in a row." Just having a look at Theresa May out and about this morning, going to church this morning in central London. How long does it take to get your ducks in the row? These are complex issues.
We need a Prime Minister in place. We need to have a very clear idea. But I want to make absolutely clear, Brexit does mean Brexit. We are leaving the European Community.
But your sense, I mean, you're talking about this issue of passporting, as it's called, for the City of London and the financial services. I mean, that's hugely complex. It could take months, couldn't it?
It's a very big deal. I've already had people in my surgery on Friday very worried about their jobs. People are coming across from one of the larger banks from America to talk to the staff. Deals are being offered in Paris and in Dublin for the transfer of those jobs. So, you know, we need to kind of retain as many jobs as we can in these services.
I'm going to start with the Conservative row over Andrea Leadsom and her comments about motherhood. Now, many of us feminists are very pleased that finally there's going to be, you know, two women vying for the top spot, but it is very depressing that this has become a row about whether or not you are fit to govern, depending on whether or not you've had children. And there's a huge backlash against Andrea Leadsom from a lot of senior Conservative women, Anna Soubry, Priti Patel, Ruth Davidson, who doesn't have children herself. She says, I have nieces and nephews, and I, like everyone else, have a very real stake in the country.
Do you think it's fair everyone's ganging up on Leadsom over this?
Well, look, I think women pay a penalty either way. I think if women have got children in politics, they suffer a hard time. They often get asked the question, can you cope? Can you dedicate enough time? If you don't have children, you almost pay a penalty. Why don't you have children? Why haven't you sort of fit that? No. I think one of the mistakes that Andrea Leadsom did make, though, was to sort of contest what was said, because Rachel Sylvester, the journalist who did the interview, is a very respected and credible journalist. And actually, when they released the transcript, it was even worse, actually, when we heard the full conversation.
And you can imagine, as a war correspondent, journalist and a mother, we face all the very same issues that many women all over Britain do, whether you're a mother or not a mother. If you've tried and you can't have kids, this is not an in Europe or out of Europe issue. This is an issue that grassroots people understand, mothers everywhere. And I think it shows a lack of judgment, to be frank. Whether you talk the feminist card here, it shows a lack of judgment to even say that in public. Because it's great to have so many women vying for the top job.
Tim, I suppose that the sort of the really poisonous aspect of this is she appeared to be suggesting that because Theresa May didn't have children, she somehow didn't have as much stake in Britain's future as Andrea did.
Absolutely not the case, and she made it absolutely clear in that interview all the way through that in no way was her passion for her family and her children to be taken in any way derogatory towards Theresa.
Yet she raised it.
Why did she do it, Tim?
Because that's what fires her up.
She did say, Tim, in the transcript that that she didn't have a stake. You know, she had a better stake of understanding the future because she had children.
People are fired up and inspired by different things. In Andrea's case, and I've known her, I'm godfather to her eldest son. Her children are the thing that really fires her up. Andy Murray today has said the most important thing for him now is his family. So is he criticising other tennis players who don't have children? Would we be having this argument if these were two men as the candidates?
We definitely would be having this argument.
Can I ask a slightly wider question? Because in all the analysis of the Leadsom versus May battle, it's being suggested that this is a kind of culture war as well. This is, as it were, the traditional conservative right, Ian Duncan Smith and so forth, a bit more sceptical about gay marriage, a bit less liberal about some of the things that came in under the modernisers and the Cameron era, getting back their final, perhaps your final chance to take back the Conservative Party.
Because we went through this through the Brexit argument as well. If the Remain camp brought out facts, the Brexiteers criticised the messenger. And the same thing is happening here in the May Leadsom race. She said what she said. She said what she said. And she said what she said. That is her judgment.
And what she said is she's passionate about her kids.
Correct.
Let's move on from the children.
When has it been a crime to be proud about your children?
It's never a crime. But the thing is, it's also about pro and who is really the best position to take this position. And I think political press need to really take the facts and see, you know, where the weight lies. But I want to ask you, policies,
well,
exactly.
I'd like to switch one policy, but Andrea...
Just a quick question here. I want to ask you, because this is a genuine question here. You have Britain First, a far-right extremist group who is potentially getting, or, you know, behind Andrea Leadsom. Is that a worry for you? Because this ultra-nationalist group is very dangerous. I mean, we've had a political assassination in this country. Of course, they denied they had anything to do with it.
You can't choose the people, I suppose, who...
But are you going to really get up and say, no, we will not be associated with this country?
Absolutely.
Look what's happening in the United States.